Hello everyone, I'm DM Rawlings, the 10-Minute DM. I'm an experienced Forged in the Dark GM, and I wanted to offer some advice to you 10 minutes at a time. So today, we're going to walk through an action roll from beginning to end and explore every branching path that happens therein. So, to set this all up, I've watched a few APs of Candela Obscura, including last Thursday's Critical Role, and to be honest, I've noticed quite a few inconsistencies with how action rolls are run from beginning to end. So I thought what I'd do is clear the air and help people get this part of the game down because it's important, right? Action rolls are the core resolution mechanic of Candela Obscura, and you're going to be making a whole bunch of them every single session. So first, let's get a little bit of context here and create a bit of a scenario that we can run through. So we've got Robin and Kelly, and they're members of Candela Obscura, and some kind of eldritch beast has escaped from beyond the flare. As they enter the location, they come across a civilian who was injured by the beast. It's clearly severe and supernatural in nature. So here's where we get to part one of the action roll. We're going to have one of the players, the player of Robin, says that they want to question the civilian, but the GM is going to say they're in no condition, they're bleeding out, they need medical attention. So Robin goes to try to treat their wounds. From there, the first thing that the GM is going to do is they're going to ask for clarity. They're going to ask how, if necessary, if the player hasn't already offered that, and say maybe what does it look like when Robin treats this civilian. It's always good to prompt players to describe what their character is going to be doing, because among many other things, beyond just making the story far more visual, it also makes it much, much easier for you to come up with good, appropriate consequences at the time. So always dig into that. From there, once you've found out how your character is going to be approaching the situation, do yourself a little check as a GM. Is the approach that Robin is going to take actually going to work? And does Robin have the means? Can they actually do what they want to do? If the answer to both of those is yes, great, we can move on to the next part. Otherwise, you may have to ask for a different approach, or maybe ask them to produce some tools or something that's going to make that possible. From here, the GM's going to declare the action that's used. It's going to be focus in this case for medical stuff. And then they're going to set the stakes, low, medium, or high. And in this case, I feel like it's very medium, even though it's high stakes for the person being treated. It's medium according to the players, and that's what really matters here. So we're going to declare those stakes openly as well, so that the player is aware of what the stakes are going to be, and so that when Robin's player hears all of this, they have a choice that they can make whether or not they're going to proceed with that action. For any reason that they want, they can just nope out of there, maybe try a different approach, or have somebody else act instead if it doesn't really suit their needs. But having that transparency is very important. Let's say, though, that Robin decides to go ahead with it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to build our dice pool. So Robin has a focus of 2, and it happens to be one of their gilded actions as well. They really, really want to succeed, so they're going to spend one of their drive from intuition to get an extra d6. And also, don't forget, Kelly is there as well, and Kelly wants to help because they definitely want to question this person later. So as a GM, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through that process again of saying, all right, explain how Kelly helps, and then, make an assessment. Is Kelly's approach actually going to be helpful, and does Kelly have the means to do that particular approach? And again, if the answer is yes, then Kelly has the ability to spend their drive, their intuition, to add an extra d6. And I think it's important to note as well, if Kelly, the character, is going to be involved in the role, then they are fair game for consequences as well. So, or maybe instead. But generally, it's a best practice to leave out a character that wasn't involved in the role at all, unless it makes a lot of narrative sense to do so. So then, we get to the role itself. So Robin picks up the dice and is going to roll the 4 of them, and obviously 1 to 3 is failure with consequences. Robin doesn't get what they want, and there's a consequence. 4 to 5 is success with consequence, where Robin gets what they want, but there is a consequence. And then 6 is a full success, where Robin gets what they want. And Robin rolls those dice, gets a 3 on the gilded dice, and also a 5, a 2, and a 2. So Robin has a choice here now. Robin can take that 5 and be successful with a consequence, or they can take the gilded die of a 3 and fail with consequence. If they do that, though, they will recover one of their spent intuition drive. In this case, the 5 is almost surely the roll that the player is going to want to take. So next up, step 4, we're going to apply consequences. So because we have a success with consequences, I don't like calling them mixed successes, by the way. I think that gets people into this trap where they think that a 4-5 is less of a success than a 6, when it's equally successful. It's just there's a consequence that tags around. So at that point, the GM gets to choose a consequence for this action. And the way we do that is we look at a few factors. The first being the stakes. The higher the stakes, the worse the consequence. And another important detail, I think, is remember that consequences never completely undo successes. There are 5 broad and often overlapping categories for consequences in Blades in the Dark. I'll just list them here so that you've got them, but we'll go way more into consequences in future videos, like several videos. This is probably the most important part of storytelling that is not intuitive for new GMs in the Forged in the Dark space. So the first is harm, someone gets hurt. Second one is reduced effect. Things didn't quite go as well as you would have liked. There was a lost opportunity. The circumstances change. A door kind of closes. There's complications where some kind of new trouble or threat appears that wasn't there before. And then there's worse positions where the stakes get higher. Any number of things that you might be able to pick here, but I think the important part is that the storyteller is always going to say, this is the consequence that your character is going to experience, and should be upfront about that. And there may be a few odd times where you say, there's going to be a consequence that I'll tell you in the future, but that should be the exception rather than the standard. And the reason for this is going to be clear quite shortly, which is step 5. Once Robin player hears the complication, they have a choice. They can either let the consequence happen without any change whatsoever, or they can choose to use their resistance on the consequence. Players should know the consequence beforehand, because if they didn't, you'd be asking them to spend that resistance blindly. And honestly, resistance in Candela Obscura is already honestly weak enough. We don't need to make that worse. If they do use resistance and they improve their circumstance, getting a higher result, then the GM should prompt you as a character to say, how did you do that? And give that character a chance to show how cool they are in overcoming things. So let's quickly summarize, because this is a lot, but the player tells the GM what they want their character to do. The GM states the action and the stakes. The player builds their dice pool, then rolls the dice. The GM narrates the outcome, applying consequences as needed, and then the player optionally can use that resistance. That's it for me today. I've been DM Rawlings, your 10-minute DM. If you've been enjoying these videos so far, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help me out.